The year was 2387, and humanity was about to learn a terrible lesson about the galaxy. For 300 years, the Dominion had conquered world after world. They were insects, but not like any insects from Earth. They stood 7 feet tall on 4 legs with 2 powerful arms that could tear metal apart. Their shells were harder than steel. Their eyes saw in the dark, and they had no mercy. Queen Ra ruled them all. She had lived for 1,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever defeated her armies. They believed they were the masters of the universe. Every other creature existed only to serve them or die. When the Armada appeared at the edge of human space, it blocked out the stars. 2,000 warships, each one the size of a small city, moved toward Earth like a wave of death. Admiral Grace stood on the bridge of the battleship Resolute and watched them come. She was 63 years old. Her hair was gray and her face was lined with years of service. But her eyes were sharp and her voice was steady when she spoke. "All ships prepare for battle," she said into the fleet communication channel. "Today we fight for Earth. Today we fight for our children and their children. If we fall together. But we do not run." The United Earth Coalition had gathered every ship they could find. 400 vessels faced the Armada. The humans knew they were outnumbered. They knew the odds were against them, but running was not something humans did well. The battle began at exactly 600 hours, Earth Standard Time. Plasma fire lit up the darkness of space. Human ships fired everything they had. Missiles streaked toward the enemy. Rail guns hurled metal at impossible speeds. For one brief moment, it looked like humanity might have a chance. Then they fired back. Their weapons were beyond anything humans had ever seen. Beams of green energy cut through human ships like they were made of paper. Explosions bloomed in the void, silent and terrible. The Resolute shook as a nearby cruiser was torn in half. Admiral watched her fleet die. Ship after ship went dark on her screens. The voices on the communication channel grew fewer and fewer, but she did not cry. She did not scream. She simply kept giving orders, trying to save as many lives as she could. On one of the smaller frigates, a young lieutenant named Cole was preparing to do something very stupid. Cole was 28 years old. He had brown hair, cut short in the military style. His eyes were gray like storm clouds before the rain. He was not tall, not particularly strong, not especially handsome. But there was something in him that made other soldiers follow him, something that burned. "Sir, the captain is dead," a young ensign told him. Her name was Maria and her hands were shaking. "Half the crew is gone. What do we do?" Cole looked out the window at the battle. A command vessel drifted nearby, its weapons tearing apart everything in range. If that ship kept firing, none of the human escape pods would survive. "We board it," Cole said. Maria stared at him like he had lost his mind. "Board it, sir? That is impossible. There must be hundreds of soldiers on that ship." "Then we better move fast," Cole replied. He grabbed his rifle and his combat knife. "Anyone who wants to come with me, follow me. Anyone who wants to live, get to the escape pods. No shame either way." 15 soldiers followed him. They were scared. They were young, but they trusted Cole with their lives. The boarding action was chaos from the first moment. Cole and his team used a breaching pod to punch through the hull of the vessel. Alarms screamed in languages they did not understand. The air smelled wrong, thick with chemicals that made their eyes water. They were waiting for them. Cole watched 3 of his soldiers die in the first 10 seconds. Plasma bolts punched through armor like it was cloth. The screams were brief. He did not have time to mourn. He only had time to fight. He moved through the corridors like a ghost made of violence. His rifle ran empty, and he picked up a fallen weapon. It was too big for his hands, but he made it work. He fired until that weapon was empty too. Then he drew his knife. They had never seen a human fight like this. They were used to species that surrendered when the odds turned against them. They were used to creatures that valued their own lives above victory. Cole was different. He did not fight like a man who wanted to survive. He fought like a man who wanted to win. One by one, his soldiers fell around him. Maria took a plasma bolt meant for him and died with his name on her lips. The last soldier, a young man named Pete, bled out in his arms after killing 4 warriors. Cole kept going. By the time he reached the reactor core, he had killed 47 soldiers. His armor was cracked. His left arm was broken. Blood ran from a dozen wounds, but he was still standing and he had a plan. The reactor controls were simple enough. Even an alien design could not hide the basic truth of physics. Power goes in, power goes out. If you overload the input, everything explodes. Cole set the reactor to overload. He had 60 seconds to escape. He did not even try to run. Instead, he sat down against the wall and watched the countdown. He thought about Earth. He thought about the blue sky and the green grass and the way the rain smelled in summer. He thought about his mother, who had died when he was 12, and his father, who had never really recovered. He thought about all the people who would live because this ship would no longer kill them. The explosion was beautiful. The command vessel came apart in a ball of white fire. 3 other ships, caught too close, were destroyed in the blast. For one moment, the battle paused as both sides watched the destruction. In the wreckage, floating among the debris, a human body drifted. Cole's heart was still beating. His lungs still drew breath. By every law of nature, he should have been dead, but death, it seemed, was not ready for him yet. They recovered his body. They could not believe what their sensors told them. A human, still alive, after destroying one of their greatest warships. Queen Ra herself ordered him brought to the... She wanted to see this creature with her own eyes. She wanted to understand how something so small and weak could cause so much destruction. She did not know it yet, but she had just made the worst mistake of her 1,000-year reign. She had let Cole live. Cole woke up in darkness. The air was thick and wet, like breathing through a sponge. Strange sounds echoed around him, clicks and whistles that hurt his ears. When he tried to move, he found that his arms and legs were held by something warm and soft. The walls of his cell were alive. He was in a prison deep beneath the surface. The cells here were not made of metal or stone. They were grown from living tissue, organic material that could tighten or loosen based on the will of the guards. Prisoners had no privacy, no comfort, no hope. For the first week, Cole screamed. Not from pain, though there was plenty of that. He screamed from anger. He screamed because he was still alive when all his soldiers were dead. He screamed because he had failed to save anyone. Then he stopped screaming. He started thinking. They came to study him. Scientists with instruments that glowed and hummed ran tests on his body. They were fascinated by humans, a species they had never encountered before the war. They wanted to know how he had survived the explosion. They wanted to know how he had killed so many warriors. Cole told them nothing. He watched their eyes when they thought he was not looking. He listened to their language, memorizing the sounds and the patterns. He learned. Queen Ra visited him once during that first month. She was the largest he had ever seen, nearly 10 feet tall, with a shell that shimmered like black oil. Her eyes were cold and ancient, filled with a cruel intelligence that had crushed countless civilizations. She spoke through a translation device, her voice emerging as flat, mechanical words. "You are interesting, human. Your species is young and weak, yet you fight like creatures possessed by madness. Why?" Cole looked up at her from his chains. His body was broken, but his eyes still held that storm cloud gray. "Because we do not know how to quit." The queen made a sound that might have been laughter. "All species learn to quit. All species break. You will break too, human. It is only a matter of time." She left. The torturers came. For 3 years they tried to break Cole. They used pain in ways that human minds had never imagined. They burned him and froze him. They starved him and drowned him. They showed him images of Earth burning, cities falling, children crying for parents who would never come. Cole screamed, he bled. He cried in the darkness when no one could see, but he did not break. Something inside him, something deeper than bone and blood, simply refused to surrender. Every time they pushed him to the edge of death, he pulled himself back. Every time they tried to destroy his spirit, he found a small piece of hope and held onto it with everything he had. The guards began to fear him. They whispered about the human who would not die. They made signs against evil when they passed his cell. The torturers requested transfers to other duties. No one wanted to be near the creature who looked at death and smiled. In his second year, Cole met was a species that they had conquered 500 years ago. He was small and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. He had been born in slavery, and his parents had been born in slavery, and their parents before them. He had never known freedom. They used as a translator and scientist. He was allowed to move between cells, studying the prisoners, recording their dying words. He had done this work for 40 years, and it had hollowed him out inside. But when he met Cole, something changed. "You have been here for 2 years," said during one of his visits. "Most prisoners die within 6 months. The strong ones last a year. What is different about you?" Cole thought about the question. His body was thin, covered in scars. His hair had gone gray in patches, but his eyes were still alive. "On my world," Cole said, "we have a word, stubborn. It means refusing to give up even when giving up makes sense. My people are very stubborn." Tilted his head. "That seems like a weakness, not a strength." "Maybe," Cole agreed, "but we are still here." Over the following months, returned again and again. He brought extra food when he could, small kindnesses that risked his own life. In return, Cole told him stories about Earth and about humanity. He told him about wars that humans had fought against each other, terrible conflicts that killed millions. But he also told him about the peace that came after, about how enemies became friends, about how humans rebuilt what they had destroyed. He told him about art and music and love, about parents who worked themselves to exhaustion so their children could have better lives, about strangers who jumped into rivers to save people they had never met, about the stubborn, foolish, beautiful way that humans kept hopping even when hope was gone. Listened with growing wonder. His people had forgotten how to hope. They had forgotten that resistance was possible. They had ruled for so long that slavery felt like the natural order of the universe. But Cole made him remember something else, something dangerous. "There is a network," whispered one night when the guards were far away. "Scattered across the Dominion. Slaves who pass messages, who dream of something different. We call ourselves the Resistance, but we have never truly resisted anything. We only hide and wait and die." Cole leaned forward, chains rattling. "Why?" "Because we are afraid. They are too strong. They have never been defeated. Fighting them would only bring more death." Cole smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. "I have killed 47 of their warriors. I have destroyed one of their warships. They are not gods. They bleed and they die just like everything else." Stared at him. "What do you want?" "I want to escape," Cole said. "I want to free every prisoner on this world, and then I want to kill Queen Ra with my bare hands." For a long moment said nothing. Then he laughed, a small and broken sound. "You are insane, human." "Probably," Cole agreed, "but I am also stubborn and I need your help." Should have refused. He should have walked away and pretended he had never heard those words. Helping a prisoner escape meant death, not just for him but for his entire family line. They believed in collective punishment. But something in Cole's eyes stopped him. Not hope exactly, something harder than hope, something like certainty. Looked at this broken human who had survived 3 years of torture and still dreamed of bringing down an empire. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Cole told him. Over the next 6 months, they planned every detail. They memorized guard rotations. They mapped the prison complex. They identified weak points in the organic walls. They reached out to other members of the resistance, slowly building a network of allies. Cole grew stronger. He exercised in his cell when the guards were not watching. He ate every scrap of food he could get, rebuilding the muscle that torture had stripped away. He practiced with imaginary weapons, keeping his skills sharp. And he waited. The thought he was broken. They thought 3 years of pain had finally crushed his spirit. They did not see the fire that burned behind his eyes, banked but not extinguished. On the night of the escape, Cole lay in his cell and smiled. Queen Ra had made a mistake. She had kept him alive to study him, to understand how humans fought, but she had not understood the most important thing about humanity. They did not know how to stay down. And Cole was about to show her what that meant. The escape began at midnight, when the prison was quietest. Cole had spent 6 months studying the patterns of his guards. He knew when they changed shifts. He knew when they grew tired and careless. He knew that at exactly midnight, there was a gap of 30 seconds when no one watched his cell. 30 seconds was all he needed. Had smuggled him a piece of bone, sharpened over weeks against the floor of his cell. It was not much of a weapon, but Cole had killed men with less. When the moment came, he moved. The organic wall of his cell was alive, but it was also vulnerable, had told him where to strike where the tissue was thinnest. Cole drove the bone shard into the wall and twisted. The cell screamed, a horrible sound that echoed through the corridors. But by the time the guards came to investigate, Cole was already out. The first guard died before he knew Cole was there. The second managed to raise his weapon, but Cole was faster. He took the plasma pistol from the fallen guard and moved deeper into the prison. 3 years of torture had left their marks on his body. His left arm still ached where it had been broken and healed badly. His lungs burned from the chemicals they had forced him to breathe. But pain was an old friend now. He had learned to work through it. The other prisoners heard the commotion. They pressed against the walls of their cells, wondering what was happening. When they saw Cole, human and bleeding and very much alive, they did not recognize him at first. Then one of them whispered his name. Cole, the human who would not die. Word spread through the prison like fire through dry grass. The resistance members that had contacted began to move. Cell by cell, the prisoners were freed. Some of them were too weak to fight. Others had been broken beyond repair. But many of them could still hold a weapon, and they wanted revenge. Among the prisoners was a young human woman named Amy Torres. She was 25 years old, with short black hair and dark eyes that had seen too much. Before her capture, she had been a combat medic attached to the Colonial Marines. She had been taken when the conquered colony Vega 7, 3 years ago. She found Cole in a corridor filled with dead guards. He was bleeding from a wound on his side, but he did not seem to notice. "You need medical attention," she said. Cole looked at her. "Are you a doctor?" "Close enough. Hold still." She tore a strip from a dead's uniform and pressed it against his wound. "I heard stories about you, the human who killed 47 warriors. I thought they were lies." 48 now, Cole said. "Maybe 49, I lost count." Amy almost laughed. "Almost. What is your plan? How do we get off this planet?" "First, we free everyone we can. Then we fight our way to the surface. Then we steal a ship and get out of here." "That is not a plan. That is suicide." Cole smiled, and for the first time Amy saw the fire in his eyes. "I have been told that before. I am still here." The uprising spread faster than anyone expected. They had never faced a rebellion on their own. They had grown comfortable in their power, certain that no slave would ever dare to fight back. That certainty died tonight. Cole led from the front. He was the first through every door, the first to face every enemy. Other species had warriors who commanded from safety. Humans, it seemed, had a different way. stayed close to him, translating orders, coordinating with resistance cells across the prison complex. The little blue alien had never held a weapon in his life. Tonight, he carried a plasma rifle and used it. "I never thought I would fight," said during a brief pause in the battle. "My people forgot how. We forgot that we ever could." "You are fighting now," Cole replied. "That is what matters." They reached the surface as the sun rose over the sky was red, like blood, and the air smelled of sulfur. This was an ugly planet, a world designed for creatures who loved darkness and war. But freedom, Cole thought, looked the same everywhere. They had freed nearly 2,000 prisoners from the underground complex. Many of them were wounded. Some would die before the day was over, but they were free, and that was worth everything. The response was swift and brutal. Alarms screamed across the city. Warriors poured from their nests, weapons ready. The queen herself demanded to know how this had happened. When they told her that Cole had escaped, she fell silent. Then she ordered the deployment of the Crimson Swarm. The Crimson Swarm was the elite guard of the Dominion. They were the best warriors of a warrior race, trained from birth to kill. Each one of them had slain 100 enemies. They wore crimson shells as a mark of their status, and they had never lost a battle. There were 500 of them. Cole watched them approach from the entrance of a tunnel system that led into the mountains. Behind him, the freed prisoners huddled together, terrified. They had won a battle, but they were about to fight a war. "We cannot beat them," one of the alien leaders said. He was a tall and gray with 6 arms and eyes that never stopped moving. "They are too many. We should run." "Run where?" Amy asked. "They will hunt us down. They will make an example of us." Cole said nothing. He was watching the Crimson Swarm move into position, studying their formation. They were good, he could see that, disciplined and deadly, but they were also arrogant. They did not fear the slaves they had come to kill. "We fight here," Cole said quietly. "We hold this tunnel. We make them pay for every inch." "We will die," they said. "Maybe," Cole agreed, "but they will remember us. They will know that we stood and fought. And maybe, just maybe, others will see what we did and find the courage to do the same." He looked around at the ragged army behind him. Humans and a dozen other species, all beaten, all afraid. But they had followed him out of that prison. They had chosen to fight. "I will not lie to you," Cole said, his voice carrying through the tunnel. "The odds are against us. Many of us will die today. But I promise you this, as long as I breathe, I will fight. And if you stand with me, we will show these creatures what free people can do." For a moment there was silence. Then Amy Torres raised her rifle. "For Earth, for Vega 7. Stepped forward, for my ancestors." One by one the others followed. Weapons rose. Voices called out the names of lost worlds and fallen friends. The fear did not disappear, but something else grew alongside it, something stronger. The Crimson Swarm attacked at noon. The battle was 7 hours of hell. Cole fought like something out of a nightmare. He killed and killed and killed until the bodies piled up around him. When his weapon ran dry, he picked up another. When that one failed, he used his knife. When the knife broke, he used his hands. The Crimson Swarm had never faced anything like him. They had crushed armies, toppled civilizations, and slaughtered millions. But this one human, this small, weak, impossible creature would not fall. By the time the sun set, the Crimson Swarm was broken. 300 of their best warriors lay dead in the tunnel. The survivors retreated, carrying stories that would spread across the Dominion. Cole stood among the fallen, covered in blood that was not his own. His body was a map of wounds. He should have been dead 10 times over. But he was still standing. He picked up a communication device from a fallen commander and activated it. The signal would reach the palace. The queen would hear. "I am Cole," he said, his voice raw and steady. "I am coming for you." Then he dropped the device and turned to his people. There was work to be done. The uprising had only just begun. The news spread faster than light. On 100 worlds, slaves whispered to each other in the darkness. They spoke of a human, a creature from a young and unknown species who had done the impossible. He had escaped the prisons of He had defeated the Crimson Swarm. He was still alive, still fighting, still free. Cole, the name passed from mouth to mouth, from species to species. It became a prayer, it became a promise, it became a weapon. On the mining world of workers stopped their machines and refused to continue. When the guards came to force them back to work, they found the tunnels empty. The slaves had escaped into the mountains, and on the walls of the mines, they had written a name in their own blood. On the agricultural planet where a dozen species toiled to feed the Dominion, fields began to burn. Slaves who had never held weapons in their lives learned to make them from farming tools. They fought and died and took as many with them as they could. On a dozen worlds, then 100, then more, the uprising spread. Cole did not know how far his name had traveled. He was too busy trying to survive. After the defeat of the Crimson Swarm, he had led his people into the mountains of The terrain was harsh, filled with jagged rocks and poisonous creatures, but it was also difficult for them to follow them here. Their large bodies were not made for climbing. They built a camp in a hidden valley, surrounded by cliffs on 3 sides. It was not much, but it was defensible. Cole organized the refugees into groups. Those who could fight received training. Those who could not fight learned to cook, to heal, to build. Amy Torres became his right hand. She was tough and smart, with a gift for keeping people alive. When supplies ran low, she rationed them fairly. When tempers flared, she calmed them. When Cole pushed himself too hard, which was always, she forced him to rest. "You cannot save everyone if you are dead," she told him one night, bandaging yet another wound on his arm. "You need to slow down." "I cannot slow down," Cole replied. "Every day we wait, more people die." "And if you die, what happens to all of these people who followed you?" Cole did not have an answer for that. Worked on communications, using stolen technology to reach out to resistance cells across the planet. The network was growing. Slaves who had hidden for centuries were finally coming out of the shadows. 3 months after the escape, the first human survivors found them. Captain Price had been a pilot before the war. When they destroyed his ship, he had escaped in a small shuttle and hidden in an asteroid field. For 2 years, he had scavenged and survived, gathering other survivors, building a small fleet from the wreckage of the human navy. When he heard the stories about Cole, he knew he had to find him. Landed his battered ship in the rebel camp and walked up to Cole with tears in his eyes. He was older than Cole, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes. But when he saluted, his hand was steady. "Lieutenant," he said, "I thought all the soldiers were dead." "Some of us are stubborn," Cole replied. Brought 47 humans with him. Soldiers, engineers, doctors, and ordinary people who had refused to give up. They were thin and exhausted, but they were still human. They still had fight in them. More survivors came in the following months. Dr. Lisa Grant, a scientist who had escaped capture by hiding among a primitive alien tribe, brought valuable intelligence about biology. She had discovered weaknesses in their shells, points where even a simple blade could pierce. Others brought weapons, supplies, and ships. The rebellion grew from a handful of desperate refugees into an army. But Queen Ra was not idle. In her palace, deep beneath the surface of she listened to the reports with growing fury. One human, one insignificant creature from a species she had never even heard of before the war. He had caused more damage to her empire than any enemy in living memory. She summoned her generals, the greatest military minds of the Dominion. They stood before her throne, their shells clicking nervously. "Explain," she said. The single word held 1,000 years of cold authority. The generals had no explanation. They only had stories. Stories of a human who had charged a plasma cannon with an empty rifle and destroyed it with his bare hands. Stories of a human who had held a mountain pass against 2,000 warriors for an entire night, killing any who came close. Stories of a human who had been shot, stabbed, burned, and broken, and who had somehow kept fighting. "He is just one creature," one of the generals said. "Flesh and blood, he can be killed." "Then why is he still alive?" the queen asked. No one answered. Queen Ra rose from her throne. She was ancient, the oldest living being in the Dominion, and she had seen empires rise and fall. She understood something that her generals did not. Cole was not just a man, he was an idea. He was proof that the could be defeated. He was hope made flesh and blood. And hope, she knew, was the most dangerous thing in the universe. "We are not fighting one human," she said slowly. "We are fighting every slave who has ever dreamed of freedom. We are fighting the belief that things can change. That is what he represents. That is what we must destroy." She ordered the fleet mobilized. Every ship, every warrior, every weapon the Dominion possessed would be brought to bear. She would crush this rebellion so completely that no one would ever dare resist again. But even as her orders went out, she felt something stirring deep in her ancient heart, something she had not felt in centuries. Fear. On a mountain far above, Cole looked up at the red sky and knew that the final battle was coming. They were gathering their forces. Soon, they would attack with everything they had. He thought about the people behind him, humans and all the others, free people for the first time in their lives. They trusted him to lead them. They believed that he could win. He did not know if they were right. He did not know if victory was possible. They were vast and powerful, an empire that had crushed every enemy for 1,000 years. But he knew one thing. He would not stop fighting. He would not surrender. He would keep going until he won or until he died. That was what it meant to be human. Amy found him standing at the edge of the cliff, watching the distant glow of the capital. She stood beside him in silence for a long moment. "Are you afraid?" she finally asked. Cole considered the question. "Yes," he admitted, "but fear has never stopped me before." "What if we lose?" "Then we lose." He turned to look at her, and in the dim light she could see the fire that had carried him through 3 years of torture and a year of war. "But they will never forget us. They will tell stories about what we did here, and maybe someday someone else will hear those stories and find the courage to fight. That is how change happens, one brave act at a time." Amy took his hand. Her fingers were calloused and strong. "Then let us give them something worth telling stories about," she said. Cole smiled. For the first time in a long while, it reached his eyes. The war was not over. The hardest battle was still to come, but he was not alone anymore. He had an army, he had allies, he had something to fight for. And Queen Ra, ancient and powerful and terrible, was about to learn what that meant. The final battle began in the sky. A fleet of stolen ships, captured vessels, and cobbled-together fighters rose from a dozen hiding places across the. Price commanded them from the bridge of a cruiser that had been rebuilt 3 times. Behind him flew ships crewed by a dozen different species, all united by a single cause. Freedom. The Armada was waiting for them. Thousands of warships, the full might of the Dominion, arranged in perfect formation. They outnumbered the rebels 10 to 1. Their weapons were stronger, their shields thicker, their warriors more experienced. But the rebels had something that did not. They had nothing to lose. Looked at his tactical display and smiled grimly. "All ships, this is Price. We knew the odds when we signed up for this. We are not here to win a fair fight. We are here to buy time. Cole needs to reach the palace. That is all that matters." The fleet surged forward. The sky lit up with plasma fire. Far below, on the surface, Cole led his strike team toward the heart of the capital. The city was a maze of organic towers and living walls, designed to confuse and trap invaders, but knew the layout. He had walked these streets as a slave for decades. Now he guided them through the shadows. The team was small. Amy Torres walked at Cole's right hand, her rifle ready. Behind her came 12 fighters, the best they had. Humans and others, all chosen for their skill and their courage. They moved fast and quiet, avoiding the main streets where warriors patrolled in force. The battle above drew most of the attention away from the surface. That was the plan. "The palace entrance is ahead," whispered. "There will be guards, many guards." "How many?" Cole asked. "Hundreds, maybe more. The queen is protected at all times." Cole nodded. He had expected this. They had planned for this, but plans had a way of falling apart when the fighting started. "We go through them," he said, fast and loud, no stopping until we reach the throne room. Amy caught his arm. "Cole, if something happens to you in there." "It will not," he said, but they both knew that was not certain. They both knew this could be the end. He kissed her forehead, a quick and gentle thing. "See you on the other side." Then they attacked. The guards at the palace entrance were not ready. They had been watching the sky, following the battle above. When Cole and his team hit them, it was like a thunderstorm striking without warning. Cole moved through them like fire. His weapons sang in his hands. Guards fell left and right. Amy was beside him, covering his back, her aim precise and deadly. Stayed close, guiding them through doorways and down corridors. The palace was vast and terrible. The walls breathed. The floors pulsed with hidden veins. Strange sounds echoed from deep below, the heartbeat of a living structure that had been grown over centuries. They lost 3 fighters in the first hall, 2 more in the second. They were everywhere, converging on them from all directions. Cole kept pushing forward. "The throne room is close," said, his voice strained. He was wounded, a plasma burn on his shoulder, but he refused to stop. One more corridor. They rounded the corner and found Queen Ra waiting for them. She stood in the center of the throne room, surrounded by her personal guard. 50 of the largest warriors Cole had ever seen, each one twice his size, each one armed with weapons that could kill a man with a single shot. The queen herself was magnificent and terrifying. Her black shell gleamed in the dim light. Her ancient eyes held 1,000 years of knowledge and cruelty. "Cole," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber, "the human who would not die, I have been waiting for you." Cole's team spread out behind him, weapons raised. They were exhausted and bleeding. They were outnumbered, but none of them ran. "Your rebellion is over," the queen continued. "Your fleet is being destroyed as we speak. Your allies are dying. You have fought bravely for a primitive creature, but all things end." Cole stepped forward. His rifle was empty. He held only his knife, the same blade he had carried since the beginning. "You do not understand us," he said quietly. "You think we fight because we believe we can win. We do not. We fight because it is the right thing to do. We fight because freedom is worth dying for. We fight because we are human, and that is what humans do." The queen made a sound like grinding stones. Laughter. "Pretty words, they will not save you." "I do not need pretty words," Cole said. "I just need you to make one mistake." He moved. The guards opened fire, but Cole was already past their first line. He was not trying to kill them. He was trying to reach the queen. Everything he had, every ounce of speed and strength and will, was focused on that single goal. His team fought behind him, buying him time with their lives. Amy screamed his name. He did not look back. A plasma bolt caught him in the side. He stumbled but kept going. Another hit his leg. He fell, rolled, and came up running. Pain meant nothing now. Fear meant nothing. There was only the queen and the space between them shrinking with every step. The queen saw him coming. For the first time in centuries, fear flickered in her ancient eyes. She raised her claws to strike. Cole reached her first. His knife found the weak point in her shell, the spot that Lisa Grant had identified months ago. He drove the blade deep and twisted. The queen screamed, a sound that shook the entire palace. They fell together, grappling on the floor of the throne room. The queen was stronger, but Cole was faster. She slashed at him, tearing lines of fire across his chest. He held on. "You cannot kill me," the queen hissed. "I am eternal, I am the Dominion." "The Dominion is over," Cole said, and he drove the knife deeper. The queen's eyes went dark. Her massive body shuddered once, twice, and then was still. For a long moment there was silence. Then the guards lowered their weapons. They stared at their fallen queen, at the human who had killed her, at the world that had suddenly changed. They were not prepared for this. Their entire civilization was built around the queen. Without her, they had no direction, no purpose, no unity. The Dominion began to collapse. In the sky above, the fleet fell into chaos. Ships turned on each other. Commanders argued and fought. Price watched in disbelief as the enemy tore itself apart. "All ships," he said, his voice trembling, "cease fire, just watch." Across the galaxy, the news spread. The queen was dead. The human warrior had done the impossible. Species that had been enslaved for centuries rose up and claimed their freedom. The Dominion crumbled like a castle made of sand. Cole lay on the floor of the throne room, surrounded by blood and bodies. Amy reached him first, falling to her knees beside him. Cole, stay with me." He opened his eyes. They were still gray, still filled with that quiet fire. "Did we win?" he asked. She was crying now. Yes, we won, it is over." He smiled. It was a tired smile, a broken smile, but it was real. "Good," he said, "I am very tired." He closed his eyes. But he did not die. Against all odds, against everything the universe had thrown at him, Cole survived. Amy refused to let him go. She worked on him for hours, using every skill she had, demanding that death take someone else today. Death listened. 6 months later, the galaxy was still healing. New governments formed. Old hatreds faded. Species that had never spoken to each other learned to share worlds and resources. It would take generations to undo the damage of rule, but the work had begun. Cole became a legend. Songs were sung about him in languages he could not understand. Monuments were built on worlds he would never visit. Children across the galaxy learned his name. When reporters asked him what he wanted, now that the war was over, he gave the same answer every time. "I want to go home." 1 year after the fall of the Queen, a small ship landed on Earth. The blue planet had been rebuilt, its cities rising from the ashes of bombardment. Humans were scattered across the stars now, but Earth was still home. Cole walked down the ramp with Amy beside him. His hair was gray and he walked with a limp, but his eyes were at peace. They found a quiet piece of land far from the cities, where the grass was green and the sky was blue. They built a small house with their own hands. They planted a garden. Years passed, decades. The galaxy changed and new challenges arose, but Cole had done his part. Now it was time for others to carry the torch. Sometimes, young people would travel across the stars to find him. They wanted to meet the legend, to hear the stories from his own mouth. Cole would sit on his porch, Amy at his side, and tell them about the war. But the story he told most often was not about killing or fighting or dying. It was about standing up, about refusing to quit, about the stubborn, foolish, beautiful way that humans kept hopping even when hope was gone. "Anyone can be a hero," he would say. "You do not have to be strong or smart or brave. You just have to refuse to give up. That is what being human means." And in the quiet evening hours, when the sun set over the green hills of Earth, Cole would watch the stars and remember. He had survived, he had fought, he had refused to surrender. And the galaxy was never the same.